Happy New Year. I hope your holidays were memorable, hopefully joyful, but time in reflection, and that you had time to spend with family and friends. I was really happy. I had all three of my sons home this last holiday. We have one son who lives in New Jersey, so we don't get to see him very often, but he came to visit and spend some time with us. So my mother was really happy to see all my boys together. I have three of them, so that was great. So this morning, I want to spend some time talking about welcoming the new year and resolutions. And we're kind of all thinking about that right now. And I wanted to thank Sandy for her message this morning, and also to thank Roz for the video that she shared, because I think it ties in a little bit with what I'm going to be talking about today, and that's thinking about the things that we have around us, the inanimate objects, and how we need to look at and view them. So we'll explore that together a little bit this morning. So, welcoming the new year, making resolutions. Let's see what we can kind of share together. Because we've just entered the new year, it's time we think about resolutions. And it's one of the things we do now. Many of us think about doing them. Some of us actually make them. Then there are those exceptional human beings who actually keep them. For most of us, our resolutions are best expressed by this cartoon. So, in any event, whether you make them or keep them is a completely personal choice. Looking at New Year's resolutions from a broader perspective is the idea that we see something in our lives that we think we need to change. And that, for me, is the more interesting idea to explore. So let's pursue that. A resolution comes about from self-reflection and taking a personal inventory at some level. That is something worth doing, especially if you are on a spiritual path. That can happen anytime, of course, but at this time of year, we're thinking about them more. In fact, I think Carol was talking about a resolution she hadn't made yet. I happen to be thinking about them because of a couple of media items I've come across recently. The first came last Monday in the Wall Street Journal that had an article my husband, Tom, who's always scouting interesting articles for me, pointed out to me, titled, "The Case for Buying Less Clothing." I don't know if you can see the title very well, but this illustration is a humorous flowchart for deciding what to do with your clothing items. And it basically is, I had to cut it in half because I couldn't fit it all on one page and it looked too small otherwise. So you can kind of see the decision process for him deciding what to do with his clothes. Anyway, in this article, writer Jacob Gallagher was focusing on his own closet and was specifically targeting men's clothing. He mentions that the global men's fashion market has grown 38% in the last 10 years, ballooning to $419 billion, up from $303 billion in 2008, 10 years ago. Mr. Gallagher says men are collectively buying more, yet are continually confronted with the dilemma of what to wear, because these teeming closets often lack organization. Of course, men aren't the only ones with this kind of problem, as we women well know. Historically, we're the ones that are often targeted for having too many clothes. What this article highlighted for me, though, was identifying a very real problem many of us face. The immediate issue is a problem of too much clothing and what we should do about it. More than just clothing, of course, this Wall Street Journal raised the larger issue many of us face of too much of everything. And maybe what Pulitzer Prize-winning novelist Edna Ferber said about that is true. Perhaps too much of everything is as bad as too little. Which brings me to the second item I came across that also made me think about New Year's resolutions. Beginning in January 1st, Netflix launched a new show called Tidying Up with Marie Kondo. Now, has anyone seen this show? Okay, few people. I suppose then all of you that have tuned in know who she is. Do the rest of you know who Maria Kondo is?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I see lots of shaking heads. Okay, for those who don't know, Maria Kondo is a tidying expert and came to worldwide attention about 5 years ago with her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, the Japanese Art of Decluttering and Organizing. So she became kind of a worldwide phenomenon. I think I certainly purchased her book here. I gave it to my sister 4 years ago. I haven't seen any results of that with my sister, but in fact I asked for the book back because I needed to prepare for today's Dharma Talk. And so my sister dug it up, and then she said, I want this back because I haven't finished it. And I said, I gave it to you 4 years ago. And so I think the fact that I wanted the book back motivated her. And I actually read it when I got it back in one day. So I think hopefully she'll be more motivated to do something with it. Anyway, so she is famous for this book and for this life-changing, this book of life-changing. Her book has been translated, as many of you know, into 30 languages and arrived in the United States in 2014. And that's when I read her book and embraced her organizing methods. She was one of many voices popularizing a less is more mentality, saying we have collectively realized that more does not equal better. So, both these recent events triggered thoughts about New Year's resolutions and how I, can make changes in our lives. So, before I go on with Marie Kondo, let me backtrack just a little bit here. If truth be told, Marie is not the first organization expert I have encountered and striven to emulate. My family would agree that I like neatness and order. After all, I got Tom to fold and neatly drape his towel over the towel bar for the last 37 years. Something he says he thinks about every single time he does it. And so it's kind of his mindfulness practice. I tried very hard to instill neatness qualities in our sons with varying and sometimes disappointing degrees of success. I am notorious among my siblings as the tosser, and none of them will let me touch their belongings. They categorically refuse any of my offers to organize their homes. They're deathly afraid of what I'm going to throw out. So I like neat, and an early organization book I got was this one, Clutter Control. I purchased this in the early 1990s after watching an infomercial along with its companion book, Speed Cleaning. I bought their products and promptly used them. So what can I say? I like order. I order these books and then I try them, and so that's kind of my nature. That's why this is a topic that I do like talking about. But I really didn't make the connection between Buddhism, decluttering, and organizing until 2014, when our OCBC Buddhist Education Center book club read this book, Clutter Busting, Letting Go of What's Holding You Back by Brooks Palmer. This book really brought home to me how our relationship to our possessions is a concrete expression of our emotional, social, physical, and spiritual health. So much of what Brooks Palmer talked about sounded very Buddhist to me. Janice Hirohama, who you know, who was already familiar with Brooks, told me about his YouTube spots and also said that he was surprised to be asked if he is Buddhist, because he's not. His definition of clutter continues to be a guiding principle for me. Clutter is anything in your life that no longer serves you. He clearly locked into the idea that our attachments to the possessions that no longer serve us are both physical and psychological clutter that hold us back from living a fully dynamic and meaningful life. Mr. Palmer has chapters that explained what clutter does to us. We assume false identities in clutter. You know, how many of us are prone to, buying things with name brands, or we think that having, really cool car makes us cooler. Clutter keeps us living in the past rather than living in the present. Clutter sometimes represents fear of change. It keeps us from risking or trying to explore further. Clutter can be an addiction. We're all familiar with some of the hoarding shows that are on TV that kind of take that to an extreme. Clutter can sometimes be a punishment for either yourself as a way to get back at people, and can be used as a weapon. Inner clutter creates outer clutter. Both are intimately connected. And clutter affects our mental state. We can become distracted and weighed down by all these things that are around us. There's more to this book, but these are some of the highlights. He can sometimes sound a little preachy and a little self-righteous, but I think some of his points are well taken. His book made me look at my possessions in a whole new way and gave me permission to let things go. Things that I might otherwise feel guilty about not keeping. Sometimes things that are very expensive, or something that was a gift. I think we all have, guilt feelings about letting those kind of things go. But they serve their purpose. Even Marie Kondo talks about those things. So now to Marie Kondo and what she calls her KonMari method of tidying. Yeah, I guess some of this didn't come up. It says the KonMari method of tidying up. I find her expression of tidying up to be infinitely amusing and endearing. It strikes me as very feminine, very Japanese, loving and gentle. Her approach also seems to me to be very Buddhist. Interestingly, when she was younger, for 5 years, she was what's called a Shinto shrine maiden. So she has, Shinto is not the same as Buddhism, but it is kind of a spiritual kind of practice. So, like Brooks Palmer, Marie changes our view of our relationship to our possessions so that they become extensions of our reality and a true expression of who we are as human beings. She has a specific methodology for organizing a home, which I won't detail for you, but we could maybe talk about during the adult study session. But for now, I would like to highlight some key elements of her program that tie in beautifully with a Buddhist perspective. In the new Netflix series, there are 8 episodes where Marie and her translator, Ida-san, because Marie doesn't speak English, go to various homes in California and help people tidy up. Here are some of the features of her method I found to have a decidedly Buddhist point of view. The first thing Marie does upon entering a house and after meeting her clients is to engage in a ritual where she greets the house and thus forms a bond with it and shows respect for its purpose to this family, kind of like what Sandy talked about this morning. She finds a suitable place in the home, sits seiza, which is like that, on her legs, closes her eyes, and is silent for a few minutes. And sometimes the owners of the house also join her. At the end, she bows and touches the floor before standing up. Now here's what she says about greeting her own home. Each time I return home, I greet the house. This is my way of expressing thanks for the shelter and comfort it provides me. A change in perspective can alter your reality. So, one of the hallmarks of her method is to declutter by category in a specific order from the least emotional to the most emotional. Rather than focusing on clutter and whether something is still serving you, as in the Brooks-Palmer method, Marie's emphasis is to surround yourself with the things that you love in your life. And it's the main criteria in the KonMari method for keeping or letting things go. Gathering every item of a category together in one pile, you hold each item and keep the ones that spark joy. Now, when I first heard that, I thought, this is a little too trippy. It's, a little weird and a little too touchy-feely, but I've gotten used to the terminology. Anyway, that's her criteria, sparking joy. From the storage website Livable, which this is not a promotion for this website, by the way, but I found an explanation from their article called The Ultimate KonMari Guide and Checklist. So this is a quote from Livable. Marie Kondo's lessons show that in focusing on what does not make you happy, you're only inviting unhappiness into your house and your life. If you look around your home and dwell on those items you can't stand, you're just generating more negativity. Instead, teaches KonMari, you should focus on what you love. By highlighting the items that bring you joy, the unenjoyed merely fall to the wayside. At the same time, by focusing your energy so positively on such joyful items, you are creating more happiness in your life. Sounds pretty great, right? Then there is this from the website Wired, from an article from January the 5th, just last week, titled The Life-Changing Magic of Peak Optimization by Emma Gray Ellis, who talked about Marie's Netflix show with this explanation. The show gives the sense that familial harmony is attainable through small, simple acts of self-refinement, such as putting your stuff in boxes within boxes. It's not a typical reality TV makeover show. There's no shocking, aspirational, yet unattainable transformation, just better folding and a palpable calm that radiates from those Kondo has assisted. One aspect that comes across loud and clear in Marie's approach is the sense of gratitude she helps people find in their possessions. She sorts things according to category. She always begins with clothing. She has each client gather every piece of clothing they possess and pile it up in one place. They must pick up every piece and determine if it creates a spark of joy in them. And one aspect I found fascinating was that even items that are discarded are thanked individually before being set aside. In that gesture is the acknowledgement that it is appreciated, even if it is no longer wanted. And one of the ideas about putting, say, all your clothing in one pile, you get a sense of just how much you actually own. If you gather everything up, people are actually astounded at what they possess. So it's kind of a visual realization of how much stuff they have. She also says, to truly cherish the things that are important to you, you must first discard those that have outlived their purpose. And if you no longer need them, then that is neither wasteful nor shameful. As in the case of a gift, she says that a gift served its purpose when you received it. So you don't have an obligation necessarily to keep it. The gift was given to you out of love, respect, for some purpose, and for that reason, it served its purpose when you received it. And so you don't need to feel that you have to keep it. On Marie's website, I found this lovely quote from Ruth Ozeki, the author of one of my favorite books, A Tale for the Time Being. Some of you may recall I did a Dharma Talk about this exact book. This is also a very Buddhist book. This is Ruth's quote. "It's precisely because we are all so intimately interconnected that we can create collective change by changing ourselves. Marie talks about how by tidying your own room, you will set off a chain reaction, and others in your house will begin to tidy too. This is true for other qualities like kindness and compassion and environmental awareness. We clean up our own act first. We do our best to inspire, quietly, patiently, and by example, knowing that we will keep trying no matter what." So ultimately, this is the connection I am making here between the work of people like Marie Kondo and Brooks Palmer. They help us forge a fundamentally new relationship with our possessions and a different way to view the things we have. Our possessions are not just things that we own, but if we delve deeper in what they mean for us, we can develop a better understanding of who we are, which ultimately is our task as Shin seekers. Whether you follow the advice of Brooks Palmer, who has a more practical, straightforward approach, when he says clutter busting is letting go of the things that no longer serve you, or if you are more inclined to Marie Kondo's approach, which is more emotionally based, both serve to help us move forward with freedom and clarity in our lives, to realize, among other things, not to be mired in the past, not to feel guilty about letting go, and that our possessions do not define us. When your room is clean and uncluttered, you have no choice but to examine your inner state. And from Dr. Haneda, deep understanding of the self is the core of the Shinjin Buddhist experience. Ultimately, deep understanding of the self is at the core of the Shin Buddhist awakening experience that we call Shinjin. Whatever we do to peel back the layers of the hindrances to that self-understanding will help us realize our true and real Shinjin. Examining our attachment to things, whether they are physical objects, experiences, relationships, will help move us in the direction of that self-awareness, and if we keep at it, to eventually unfold liberation. I urge everyone to continue to stay on the path. Please join me in Gasho.